President Cyril Ramaphosa says the ANC remains the most relevant political party in South Africa. He made the remarks during the party's 114th anniversary celebrations yesterday. The president has urged ANC leaders to put the needs of South Africans ahead of their own interests. Again, many citizens heard promises of a better life, more jobs and improved services. These are commitments that are repeated yearly. Political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi joins us now to talk about what's already been said and the expectations from the official celebrations this weekend. Prof, good morning, Happy New Year to you, and thank you as always for being available and for your time. I want to kick things off from a political sociology perspective, I think. I shared with you there in the intro the statements made by the party president, Cyril Ramaphosa, that the ANC is unmatched in relevance and in importance. But we have seen in real terms declining voter numbers, smaller stadiums to celebrate these events. How do we measure the party's relevance in this moment?
Hi, good morning, Iman, and good morning to the viewers. For me, I do agree with the President Cyril Ramaphosa that the African National Congress still remains one of the largest and actually the most organized political party. But for me, that's where it ends. Because there have been several factors, both within the African National Congress and outside of it, externally, that have contributed to this. Internally, we talk about the whole issues of factionalism and the inability of the party to sustain the policies. It's extremely good in designing policies, but when it comes to the implementation and to sustain these policies, it has been a problem. And that also relates to governance and some of the administrative challenges that the African National Congress have faced over many years. But if you look at in terms of the footprint, political footprint of the African National Congress, for me, the political space has definitely shrunk over the years with the entrance of many opposition parties, some of them falling, by the way, smaller opposition parties. But we've seen lately with the EFF, MK party, to what extent these parties have actually hurt the dominance of the African National Congress in the South African political space.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be honest and to be fair, we talk about its light dimming against the support and the performance that it's had previously. And yes, certainly there have been losses, 14 to 15% in voter support, but it still occupies quite a dominant and formidable position, even though it's not the majority party. But we keep hearing some of the recurring themes, Prof. Matebesi, promises of jobs, better services, a better life. We've seen these commitments repeated year after year. At what point do the promises lose political legitimacy?
A very good question, because there's one thing to be the most organized and actually well-known party in the continent, not only in South Africa, but there's, for me, a disjuncture when it comes to some of the promises that have been made. But there's many commendable achievements. I mean, there are people who have to, on a daily basis, getting free medical attention at our primary healthcare institutions in South Africa. That is remarkable. And I personally had been in that situation where I have to pay over 2,500 for my daughter. Now, for somebody who does not have that kind of money, it's very difficult. So there's a lot of really commendable achievement coming from the African National Congress. But as I've indicated, you know, the issue of job creation and all that, and many other challenges are actually conflating and compounding some of the challenges that our African National Congress are facing. And for me, unemployment is the challenge going forward. If you look at the electricity prices, food prices, that will pose tremendous pressure for an organization more than 100 years old, a century old, which is already bleeding. And by the way, we're sitting on an eve of a local government election.
I mean, look, I don't want to bring in Greta Mantashe's comment about unemployment right now. I think it's been well discussed in the public space. But what I thought was interesting was the choice of location for this particular celebration. The Northwest, this is where we've seen major service delivery issues, Prof. There is that really unflattering, in fact, damning SAHRC report detailing just how bad these service delivery failures are, including human rights violations across various municipalities in the Northwest. Was this a bold political move to have it there while you're talking about a better life for people?
No, I wouldn't even say it's a bold political move. Remember, the ANC celebrations are being hosted in different provinces all over the years. And if you say you are the party that actually represents the voices of South Africans, then the party has to avail itself to South Africans, irrespective of where they are. But coming back to perhaps what I would say another layer of your question, in responding to that, for me, and I'm going to be extremely blunt here, the Eastern Cape, Northwest, for me, Northwest is actually a huge shame that with all the mines and potential benefits that can be accrued from mining, that the roads and the infrastructure and the people are battling the way they are battling in the Northwest province. For me, that is indicative of perhaps, I don't know whether it is the inability of our leaders or the political will to take on this monster of taking responsibility on behalf of South African citizens. That it's another disjuncture for me, and it's a shame, as I've indicated, that a province like Northwest can be facing such challenges while there are so many mines that are around that particular area.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a sobering point that you remind us about, Prof. Matebesi. We again heard the party president, Cyril Ramaphosa, urging their own leaders to stop prioritizing self-interest over the needs of South Africans. And I guess on that sentence alone, a lot can be said. But given that many service delivery failures are oftentimes, or in certain instances, linked to cadre deployment and weaker accountability, or accountability not optimal in the party, can the ANC realistically reform itself without real sort of structural reorganization, a real radicalism within the organization?
Yeah, one thing is that despite all the challenges that the African National Congress faces, it has what I would call the luxury of historical loyalty. And secondly, also, it's still in control of key levers of power. And that perhaps will give them a vantage point to be able to start off. But the problem with the African National Congress, it's not the organization in itself, but it's the manner in which the organization has allowed what I will call criminals. And I'm repeating this. Criminals who have entered the space of this organization, and they have created so much havoc that it is now very difficult even for, and I'm going to put my head yet once again on the block here, where even the leaders of the African National Congress cannot deal with this monster within the party. And it's going to be very difficult, as I've indicated. The political space in South Africa is shrunk, and the ANC, to start off, perhaps if I can provide a little bit of advice, it's they need to become decisive when it comes to consequence management. You can't have a situation where somebody has embezzled so much money, serious allegations, and yet they are promoted, taken to another. These are small little things which I think over the years, and perhaps the current leaders should leave that kind of legacy for future leaders. Then I think in future, perhaps the ANC will be able to deal with the cobwebs of what I call, mismanagement, corruption, and all that they have bedeviled this glorious organization.
And you use those terms, which just reminds me of various press conferences I've been in with the party over, the last many years, where it talks about, graduating from liberation movement into governing party. And you talked a little bit about the historical significance and legitimacy of the ANC. But is it still operating psychologically as a liberation movement that relies on that very important historical legitimacy, rather than as a modern party which is going to be governed by performance? And what would the long-term consequences of that be? I mean, I'm just remembering as well the president of the party acknowledging recently, for example, that the DA runs some of the best performing municipalities, yet insists that the ANC is the country's most important political force. How do voters reconcile this contradiction between governance outcomes and political loyalty?
No, the ANC has the capability of competing with the Democratic Alliance and even doing better. But as I've indicated, those who are capable, those who are willing to, arrest the decline are actually sidelined. And we've seen it on numerous, these are not thumbsuck allegations. We've seen it on numerous occasions where those who become vocal are being sidelined within the African National Congress. The ANC has itself to blame. And I strongly believe that the ANC itself can only, deal with this particular situation. In terms of legitimacy, yes, to a certain extent, you will see during events like now, there are some indications that this seems to be a liberation party, but the ANC has also entered that space of acting as a modern political party. And we've seen on numerous occasions how the ANC has come forth and dominated that space, occupied the space as a, modern party where the party will engage with its members and even some of the sophisticated, structures and systems that have been implemented to run this organizations, which I still maintain that in terms of its footprint, it's incomparable with any other political party in South Africa.
Well, we will see what transpires this weekend. Prof, hopefully there is another conversation between us about that. Thank you for your time again. Political analyst, Professor Sethulego Matebesi, talking about the ANC's 114th celebrations.